Mike Blackburn here with Guthrie Govan, here in town in the fabulous Cosmo Music Emporium. It's the first time I've been here, and probably the first time you've been here. Let's go way back. How does a young lad of 3 suddenly find a guitar in his hands? How did that come about?
I blame the parents. It wasn't one of those things where I decided to start playing guitar any more than I decided that I would take up speaking English or walking. It was just one of those things that seemed natural because of the upbringing I had. My parents were both very into their music, and I grew up with this idea that music was a serious art form and that it was something that should be revered and appreciated rather than just being sonic wallpaper that goes on in the background of our lives. And there was a guitar in the corner of the room. Why would I not want to play a few chords?
Did any other members of the family actually play that guitar? Or is...
My dad, he wasn't great, to be honest. I think he had me and subsequent kids instead of pursuing his musical ambitions. So he just knew a handful of chords and he shared those with me, and then after that I was on my own.
And so at 3, when did you start taking any formal lessons or anything
still
like
haven't.
that? You still haven't?
I'm a complete imposter. I trot around the world doing masterclasses and stuff, and I've never had a guitar lesson.
That's great. And I guess around the house were Hendrix and Cream and things like that.
Oh, totally.
So that was your upbringing and lessons.
Yeah. I was lucky in that I got to experience most of the rock and roll stuff in chronological order. So at first it was the sort of Sun era, Elvis and Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis and all that kind of good stuff. And then sort of worked through the Beatles and Cream and Hendrix and all that. I'm kind of glad I learned the Elvis stuff first, because with the 50s rock and roll you really can learn 3 chords and then you've got enough knowledge to play a whole gig, which apparently I did when I was about 5.
When did you have your first working band, as it were?
I'm not even sure. When I was growing up I did a lot of stuff where I would be the weird kid and I would guest with bands full of people who were older and wiser than me. And to be honest, all the way through school I found it hard to find anyone who was sort of comparable age and comparable level of passion about music. So I was a bit of a misfit. Generally I ended up hanging out with kids who were older than me and just jamming with them.
And so when was it, at what age were you when you submitted to Mike Varney? And I understand you made that submission not on the hopes of getting a record deal, but just some confirmation of how good you really were at that point.
Yeah, at that time I was reading like Guitar World and Guitar Player and all this on a monthly basis, and those talent columns that they had towards the back of each issue, that seemed like the only outlet where you could reach the wider world and find out if you really were any good or not. So I guess I would have been 19, 20, something like that.
So this would be around 1990 or?
Yeah, I guess early 90s. And the time when Mike actually got back to me and said, I like your demo, I want you to make an album, that was a period where I was at Oxford University reading English and kind of torn. It's like, which way should I go? Should I go left and become a clever person, or should I go right and become a filthy rock and roll person?
Well, can't you do both?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I like the fact that subsequently I got to write 2 books and I got to write all this stuff for guitar magazines, and being able to spell did actually come in handy. But I felt that it was better just to choose one part or the other and do it properly rather than just being pulled from both directions. So I made a dramatic decision. Yeah.
It's refreshing for guys like me to meet well-educated musicians from the UK, because there are few of them in North America. Since Frank Zappa died, there's not many to talk to, intelligent people.
Well, I think I used to be well-educated, but that was a long time ago. That was many gigs ago.
And so what transpired in the era? I know you played with Asia, but between the time that you said no to Mike, you wanted to do your own thing, and eventually coming out with your first record, Erotic Cakes.
There's kind of a black hole there. Some of the stuff in Erotic Cakes is very old. Some of it's music that's been incubating for a long time. But there was a long period where I wasn't sure if anyone really wanted to hear that music. This will be a strange thing for viewers now to imagine, but there was a time before the internet, and it was harder for someone like me to work out how to reach the kind of people who would be interested in that music. All I knew is that I didn't just want to be a shredder, and I was more interested in writing pieces of music that I thought were cool and then improvising within that framework, rather than presenting this package of, check me out, I've got this new sweeping trick that no one else can do yet. So yeah, I was a little bit lost, really. I didn't know what to do with the music I was writing, and mostly I played because I couldn't help it. I just enjoyed making music, and I felt happier playing than not playing. And I guess the only professional thing I was doing in the early days was transcribing for a guitar magazine, which was one of those things where I had to invent the job for myself. Because there's no real structure to the way you build a career for yourself in music. So back in the day, I remember thinking to myself, well, what can I do? What can I do and find easy where other people would struggle? And because of my self-taught imposter thing, it seemed like transcribing stuff, just listening to something and knowing how it was played, that seemed like my USP, if you will. So I sort of wrote to guitar magazines and said, I can do this, do you have a gig for me?
During that time, were you teaching as well? Did you have private students? And
yeah, I guess I started doing that when I was about 13.
put food on the table?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
I think I learned how to teach just by doing it repeatedly.
Now, it's been widely speculated that Erotic Cakes is possibly the single most downloaded guitar album of all time. Illegally, I'm speaking here. I'm sure you're aware of that. And I think around the time I went to the London Music Show in 2007, someone mentioned to me that a whole lot of them got swiped out of the warehouse as well?
Yes.
The CDs?
In the UK, the term for this is ram raid. I don't know if that translates on this side of the pond, where somebody basically tied a chain to the wall of the warehouse where they're being stolen, and tied the other end of the chain to a van and then accelerated. What can you do? The record company's response was, well, they've just stolen 5,000 copies of an instrumental album. If they can sell 5,000 copies, they've got a job. They can come here and work for us. So I'm sure they're just lying in a ditch somewhere.
But surely it must have been very off-putting for you, both of those situations, when you've worked your lifetime to get to that point, put out a CD, and to then have all that happen. You must have been...
It's just one of those many things. You know, you pick yourself up and carry on. And I don't think anything can be achieved by dwelling on it.
Yeah.
It happened, it's done. And here's the funny thing about that, though. I've seen what those CDs look like, where you have a box of 100 CDs, and the label on the side says Guthrie, space, Govan, space, hyphen, space, erotic, space. Oh, run out of label. So Guthrie Govan, erotic, and there wasn't space on the label for the word cakes, so I don't know what they thought they were stealing. But hopefully they were very disappointed.